Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Jin.
And I'm your co-host, Shane Carvalho.
We got another fun mindset topic for you guys today, and it's about stop being a nice guy.
I mean, that sounds harsh when you roll it out like that. I mean, can you elaborate?
It is. I mean, so it's interesting. Let me say this because I used to like when I was growing up. Anytime somebody said, "Hey, you're such a nice guy," I used to take that as a compliment. Nowadays, you can use any other adjective to describe me. You can call me a good guy. You can call me an empathetic guy. You can call me a giving, caring guy. Just don't fucking call me a nice guy because I absolutely hate it. And what we're going to get into is, why is it bad to be a nice guy? Well, because being a nice guy means you have freaking weak boundaries, you lack assertiveness, you don't have the right priorities, and you're not willing to set up the right boundaries for yourself. And you ultimately end up hurting not only your personal life, but also your professional life and your business. So that's what we're going to get into today. And as you can tell, I'm pretty fired up about this topic.
I was like, holy moly, look at the passion. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess another part of that is being like a pushover, just a people pleaser, right? Like, I mean, I would say along those lines.
That is absolutely the right way to put it. Yeah, the being a pushover and a people pleaser. This is why I hate it. If I ever hear somebody say, "Oh, you're such a nice guy," it fucking pisses me off these days.
I know. I don't know if I've seen you more passionate lately. Well, so I mean, there's and like I was thinking about what you said, and so yeah, growing up, like nice guy used to be like such a compliment, right? It always
Mhm.
reminds me of like, your grandma's friends or whatever. You're such a nice boy, Shane. You're such a nice. But it's like it meant like well mannered or
Yep.
obedient or whatever else, and somehow it's transformed over time. I don't know if it's something that came out once social media came to be or whatever, but yeah, the nice guy thing definitely that meaning definitely shifted.
Well, it's interesting you say that because it gets me thinking. Like, even when Grandma used to say you're a nice kid or a nice person, like, what exactly does that mean? It means what? You follow the rules, right? It means probably you're doing what you're told, right? It probably means you're not talking back, right? And then granted, like there's healthy ways to do that versus like acting out as a kid. But then I think about that side of that's I wonder, like, has it really changed? Because when we talk about nice guys, we talk about being a people, like a being a pushover, being a pleaser of people. Like, isn't it doesn't it boil down to just those same points? Is you're not willing to stand up for yourself. You kind of listen to what people are telling you, what people tell you to do, you go ahead and do. You follow other people's direction. You don't really, talk back to anyone. Isn't I mean, at the core of it, isn't that the same thing?
You sound like you're being bullied by grandma.
Yeah, yeah, to a way. Yeah, maybe you're being bullied by grandma.
No, I mean, I hear you. I could see the correlation, but no, I mean, I've touched on some of these things before in some previous talks, and like what I've said before is that being nice has bitten me in the ass, and it's this goes back to like putting your filter on other people, right?
Yep.
Like, I'm gonna go ahead and not bother to put this in writing because like they're cool, like this is all good, we understand each other and whatever. Oh, I'm just gonna give him this and I know he'll just pay me back later. Like I've had a couple people that I lent money to that figure at some point it would be coming back without anything too formal, and it's like been a while and it's you know haven't heard anything about it, and it's just it's just being casual like that, just being just because how you are, like you wouldn't not pay somebody back, or you wouldn't not keep up your end of a bargain. Like for me, like the old school part is like the whole handshake agreement, right? And you can't have handshake agreements with anyone anymore. So I classify not being more professional and being more casual. I classify that being a nice guy versus keeping business and pleasure super separate, right? Even though those people might not be your friends or whatever, it's still kind of a friendly thing to be like, here, here, buddy, here, friend. Realistically, if you treat business like business, it's not that you're not a nice guy; it's that you're not stupid. You're handling things right, and you're not doing either one of you any favors, by not handling those situations the right way.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think like that I would classify, like not being a nice guy and that's it, like being a nice guy in that situation, I should say, really causes you to have unhealthy relationships, whether it's personal or in business. Right. And to your point, it's like we can't put the same lens that we have on other people. And so when you're just that nice guy, not thinking things through, like keep putting emotion into it versus like just treating it kind of as a business like relationship, a business deal. And being too nice means, people can and will take advantage of you. And, we both have kind of experienced that in the past.
Yeah. Well, it burns those friendships too. Like, I mean, if it was somebody that's a friend and, there was a misunderstanding, you know, instead of being Mr. Nice Guy, it's my friend or whatever, had you put that in writing, then you might have saved your friendship because it might have been misconstrued or someone might have forgot or misunderstood.
Yep.
Like for me, you know how busy like I run around all crazy and I talk fast and sometimes even people on our team like they'll misunderstand something I said or whatever and do something completely opposite and then like it's like, oh crap, why'd you do that? No, well, this is what you said. Well, it's my bad because I know I'm in a hurry and I'm trying to just download stuff real quick. Um, you know, that's an exact moment where then I'm bitter or frustrated with them. If I had just like written it out or actually taken a breath and made them repeat back to me, one of those principles of communication.
Yeah.
So, okay, Michael, I hear you. So you're saying that this and this and this is this and this is what we should, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, yeah, right. So repeating what's being told to you that really slows you down and it creates communication where the other person's hearing you. Whereas being nice, saying things, 100 miles an hour and then cutting out, that can create a problem later,
Well,
So,
yeah. And I think the other part of it when it comes to communication is like if you're a nice guy, like what happens sometimes is you're afraid to ruffle feathers. You're afraid to hurt people's emotions. So then what
you
happens
don't
when
want
it
to
comes to
offend them.
communication?
You don't want
Yeah,
to
exactly.
offend
You
them
don't
by,
want to offend them. So what happens
right.
is when you try to communicate to them, you end up sugarcoating things. And when you
Yeah.
sugarcoat things, you end up, they have a different expectation. They hear something different from what you were intending. And then you just cause more problems for everyone down the road, yourself included.
I've done this with clients. Oh yeah, yeah, it won't be very much. No, yeah, we'll handle. It's like, I mean, not
Yeah.
now. I got it pretty much down, but it's made things awkward with clients, especially if it's clients you just met, you just started working with. If you do that, and especially if they've never sold a house before, it, they could be really confused or not understand,
Right.
and
Because
then
you're
it
not
does
setting the
create a
right
problem.
expectations, right? And
Yeah,
then something comes along. It could be their first time buying or selling a house, and it's already an emotional like roller coaster, right?
right.
And then like these other surprises start coming along because we didn't effectively communicate something to them up front and set that expectation. And then what happens? It's like the more surprise and plus an emotional journey already just equals more emotion and more reactions and like problems that you have to then figure out.
No, that's all true. That's all true. And you know, yeah, I there's times like, we all have our regrets at moments, right? I mean, I know it all builds character and it builds who you are, but like there's been many moments I've wanted to take back and like, why didn't I just do this or why didn't I just do that? So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely can relate.
Well, let's talk about another aspect of kind of being the nice guy and why that hurts your business. And I think you mentioned at the beginning it's about being a people pleaser, and what's associated with being a people pleaser sometimes is you often become a yes man or a
Totally.
yes woman or a yes person. Yeah. And you're constantly finding yourself saying yes, whether it's to a personal request, a peer partner request, or even to a client request, and that just gets you into a whole other like mess that you don't need to deal with.
Well, and you don't stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Like I just, oh yeah, sure. And then afterwards, I'm like, what did I just commit to? Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yep. You overcommit, and then you have to deliver on it, right? And then what happens is you burn yourself out because you're committing to too many things all at once without really thinking about
Well, yeah, because I have a high level of integrity. So once I commit, I'm in for the ride, baby.
it. Yeah. 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 I mean, I've had this happen to me, like kind of in the professional setting, where sometimes it's like I want to make a good impression, and so like when I get asked something, and I feel like new agents probably fall into this trap too, is like you want to make a good impression, you want to make yourself seem like you know what you're doing, or you're wanting to help your clients because you want to build out your business. So I think it's a common trap to fall into, where a client asks you something and you just constantly want to just say yes as a way to like maintain that relationship. And
Hmm.
it's a common pitfall, and it's something that definitely new agents should be on the watch out for.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think one thing I do tell new agents, in fact, I just had a call with one of my new agents today, and we were talking about, what you deliver in communication to a client, especially when you're newer. You got to be careful what you're delivering. You got to remember to say, you know what, let me check on that and get back to you.
Yep.
Because it's easy to create these expectations that they really can't deliver on or shouldn't deliver on, and I actually, like I said, I mean, I had this same conversation today. And because I've been through it enough, it's like I'm trying to keep them from doing the same thing I did. It's like a lot of people have to learn for themselves.
Yep.
But if we can give people, at least some tips or some shortcuts to avoid the situation, I do the best that I can.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point too, and that's kind of what I've had to learn also in my journey. Is like I think it as agents, it's very important for us to be assertive. It's on us. We are the experts. It's on us to lead our clients versus having our clients lead us. And we've talked about that before on other podcasts. I think the part I want to clarify is being in the lead and leading and being assertive doesn't necessarily mean you have to feel like you need to come up with the answer right away, to kind of what you were saying earlier. Sometimes being assertive and being a leader is admitting like, hey, like that's a great question, let me check on it and let me get back to you, to your point, right? Because otherwise what happens if you have this mindset of feeling like you always need to have the answer right away? You rush into something like we were talking about earlier. You rush into a decision, you commit yourself to a course of action that if you're actually thinking, you might be like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. And what happens if you run your mouth again? You set a crappy expectation for your client, and then you find yourself backtracking, and that makes you look more so of an idiot than if you just say, "Hey, let me get back to you."
Well, and the thing is that there's newer clients that don't really know the process or
Yeah.
the journey, and you can get away with that sometimes. But when you're dealing with, seasoned clients or investors, like, I mean, you're literally going to burn the relationship like right away. I mean,
Yeah.
seasoned people can see right through that. So it's, you want to always be honest, and a lot of times they're okay with you having less experience as long as you're achieving the goals that they need.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes they're even willing to have someone that could be more of their puppet because it gives them more control. And so it's like you can't always assume that having a little less experience is going to make you less desirable. I mean, some clients feel more comfortable because they feel like you're someone that's not too busy, that's going to give them the attention that they need. And then they also, for some people, some of these investors, they want someone that'll be willing to write like a low ball offer if that's what's needed or whatever. Someone that they can control a little more, to do things their way. So it's not that I'm saying that you want to be in that situation as that
Don't be a
agent,
puppet. Yeah, but
but I'm just saying that
yeah.
it does, just accept where you are, and then just choose if you want to work with those people or not. But understand that some of these clients actually are okay with those situations or even seek those out. Just like some of these first time home buyers are intimidated by someone that's too seasoned. Like I've had some clients have had to pass off to less experienced agents on the team because they were just so intimidated. They felt, even though I don't pressure anybody, they felt like pressured or uncomfortable. And I was like, you know what? Let's step back. Let's take a step back and let's reduce the speed a little bit. Let me get you with somebody that you could take your time and see more stuff and kind of go at a slower pace if that's what you need. Because for me, when someone wants to buy a place, I don't push them, but I get it done.
Yeah.
You want to buy something? Let's see what you want, and let's roll. So yeah, I think part of that is also adjusting to the audience. You just they're your audience, right? So adjusting to the audience.
No, it definitely is. And I think for like certain, like, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's still like you have to be very mindful of your own boundaries and kind of how much you're willing to adjust to, like I had a new buyer like a while back. It was years ago now, but he was brand new to the game, and like he was trying to buy like a new construction property here in the Bay Area. And for him, like buying like $1 million like property was a big deal. So he was like super stressed about it, and I understood that, right? And so I, you know again, it's like adjusting to your clients. So for me, it was like being a lot more patient, like answering all the questions that he needed to, because it was his first time, and I totally understand that, having been in his shoes myself. But then ultimately it kind of got to a point where there was one time, we were talking, and I was like, well, let me get back to you. Like, I got to look into this. And he, I forget what exactly happened, but he ultimately made a statement to me where we're just like, at that point, I was like, okay, we're going to stop this right now. Because what he said to me was like, okay, you're my real estate agent. I expect you to be available 24/7. And I'm like, no, dude, that shit's not happening. And like, and honestly, in the past, as a people pleaser, like I grew up as a people pleaser, I probably wouldn't have taught, I probably wouldn't have set that boundary for myself.
So
But
you
in this,
just set a boundary. You're not a nice guy
I'm
anymore.
not a, no, I'm not a nice guy anymore. I'm like, I'm going to treat you, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to help you along in this process. Right. But if you're expecting that I'm going to be available, like I'm going to wake up, like, I think he was emotional and he was stressed, and I totally get that. But sometimes it's just like, if you make a statement to me, like, hey, I expect you to wake up at like, 12 a.m. if I text you, like hell no. Like I have my other like priorities. I have my other boundaries. Like I am willing to help you, but if you expect that I'm going to be up like at your beck and call, like that's not the way I operate. And so if that's what you expect, then I'm okay. Like, I will introduce you to another agent who you might get along with better.
Well, that just led me into another thought. Um, I've had client codependency.
Mm.
Client codependency is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so passionate to do a good job
Yeah.
and please your clients that you become emotionally tied
Yeah.
to how they behave, how
Yeah.
they act.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with that right now with one of the clients I do have currently. And it's frustrating because I'm doing a great job. I'm using my creativity and my experience to put together, some amazing solutions to make this all work out. And my client continues to give me a hard time, like they don't trust me. And I was talking to my coach about it the other day, and I was like, "Hey, I mean, what's the deal here?" My coach is like, "Look, you have to disconnect and realize that you do your job, and you know better than to seek validation or approval, right? Like you're doing a good job, you're the professional. If your client's not gonna be able to accept that, as long as they're not being abusive to you,
Yeah.
like just basically just roll with it. Okay, whatever. You're letting them know what you can do. You're doing the best you can. You're doing the absolute best job you can. That's all you can do.
Yep.
But don't be attached
Yep.
to that outcome or that reaction.
Yep.
And just I guess I just needed a gentle reminder because I get sucked in. But that's part of the nice guy syndrome, is getting involved so emotionally because we do so much for our clients. And it's the other thing too, is that like for years I've worked so much. I mean, now I have a lot better balance, but for years I would work day and night. That's all I knew. It was weird to have time off. I didn't want to have days off. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with myself. Like it was like, wait, I'm not going to work. How do I just I didn't know how to relax anymore. Like when the market's been hot, we've been in the heat of the market. On a day off, I didn't know how to be.
Hmm.
I couldn't wind down.
Hmm.
Like that's how engaged and involved I've gotten in the business over the years. And obviously now it's a little more tame. But like I said, currently I have one situation like this where it engulfs me, and it's it's frustrating. It's frustrating that I let it get to me, and it's frustrating that I even, because I do want approval, I want good reviews, I want them to be happy. The people pleasing part of that, like I want them to be happy. They're not happy, and they should be. I understand, if there's death in the family and such, so I understand it's a tough time for them emotionally,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm the outlet because I'm connected to that, connected to a property, so I don't know. It's but it's tough, because especially when it's someone you've known for a long time, it's like, even though business is business and personal is personal, if you feel like you're doing a good job on the business side and you're getting beat up a little bit, it's hard for me not to take that personal. And so that's where the whole nice guy can be a bit of a problem.
Do you feel like you would? Do you feel like at this point with that situation, if it got any worse, like would you walk away?
Well, I we're kind of heading towards closing things out.
Okay.
If I was, on the market with no results, and
Yeah.
if it got abusive,
Yeah.
yeah, I drew that line in the sand back in 2014. I believe it was about 9 years ago.
Okay.
Drew that line on the sand. I walked away from a yeah a 8-figure listing.
Wow.
Walked away. Walked away. $250,000 commission. It was that day in 2014 that I learned how I could never be bought.
Hmm.
And that was actually liberating. I went through a run of some very here's the thing. I have wealthy clients that are super cool, chill, love them, totally normal. Then you have the wealthy people that are super snooty. You're supposed to kiss my feet, everything else. I don't do good with that. Like I just, people that are so full of themselves, like I just don't operate well under those conditions. People that are entitled, you should be thankful. You should, no, like, no, I shouldn't. Like, and if people do, well, there's your sheep. Go find them. That's not me. I'm a freaking wolf. I'm a leader. Like I'm not one of the sheep.
Yeah.
And it's like, I, I don't have a problem with subordinating as you being the client and being in charge. I have no issue working hard for you. I do have issue though in being, demoralized or demeaned or, expected to. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I mean, expected to kiss your ass. Like that's not me.
Right.
Go find someone else.
Yeah.
And so I learned that I couldn't be bought. That was super powerful,
Yeah.
for multiple reasons. Because one thing I always tell clients that I mentor and coach is that, basically just take care of people and the money's always there.
Hmm.
Don't focus on the money.
Yep.
And I'm very big on that. And that was practicing what I preached. I walked away from a $250,000 commission. They weren't treating me good, so freaking beat it. I'm done. I lost about $25,000 in marketing and videos and photos and everything else. But oh my gosh, you know, that loss was a win.
Yep.
I was free.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I know it's a long answer to your question, but would I walk away today? Oh, dude. I mean, if I can walk away from that, I can walk away from anything.
Yeah. I mean,
In our market, we don't get those kind of listings that often because our real estate isn't quite priced that high. Run of the mill stuff for me is like the $1 to $6 million range. I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with in our market. So it's getting into the 10 million plus is just not as common. And I don't want to label that everybody's like that because, like I said, I have a lot of other really affluent clients that are super cool, super laid back, totally respect me. We're friends. We have a lot in common. So yeah, can't be bought, man. That's something I learned.
no, that's incredibly important. I think a part of it is like, I mean, what I like the statement I'm hearing in my head to kind of sum this up is like you can be a professional without being a pushover, and the two don't equate. Like when it comes to like how we interact, how we treat our clients, how we like try to do the best for them. And you can be a professional and you can service them to the utmost highest quality that we do, and at the same time you don't have to be a pushover. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. Now, if you're watching on YouTube or streaming this on your podcast platform, if you could do us a favor, leave a comment down below and let us know where you're listening or watching the show from today. It greatly helps with the algorithm and helps us get reach out to more people who need or want to hear what we have to say. We greatly appreciate it. And now back to the show.
Yeah, my coach was telling me that a lot of these clients don't realize how much we do for them, and I really hadn't thought about that, right? Because in my eyes, I see it, I know it, but part of the reason is because I do this all the time.
Yep.
And for a lot of them, it's like such a rarity to like have a transaction. And because like I said, I mean, a lot of them might be the only time they've done it or they know very little. And so it's like you got to give them grace from that aspect, But my coach reminded me of that. And I was like, oh, I guess I didn't even think about that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like let's pivot a little bit because we've talked about kind of how being a nice guy and a people pleaser can ultimately hurt your relationships, hurt your business. You talked about kind of going back to 2002, how you were able to finally just walk away from a deal, and that's just been a game changer for you. How did you like going from being a people pleaser, going from being kind of codependent on your clients and their emotions, like what things did you do to ultimately get you to a point where you were able to walk away from that deal?
Well, so it was in 2014,
Mhm.
and this big one I walked away from, that triggered me canceling like 4 or 5 listings to the point where my broker called me into the office and was like, "Are you feeling okay? You just canceled like $20 million in listings in the last 2 weeks."
Yeah.
And I was like, "You know what? I'm feeling liberated. I'm feeling great." You know what the breaking point was for me?
What?
And I still remember exactly what car I was in, what the weather was like, where I was driving.
Hmm.
I remember that voice.
Hmm.
I had this lady that had a beach house here in La Selva, a second home that she wanted to sell. She was retired and lived in a beach house in Malibu on the Strand. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's, Malibu, the Strand. I mean, those are cheapest
High.
house on that strip is probably 10 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and she did it in the cosmetology industry.
Oh
She
wow.
owned beauty salons.
Okay.
So, and good for her, more power to her. Like, I was happy that she was successful, and that's great. But the thing is you can be super rich or make a ton of money and still respect people and treat people good. So the final breaking point for me was getting cussed out by her. She was in her 70s. She was dropping F-bombs at me. I was in Santa Clara.
Uh-huh.
I was in front of a good client's house in Santa Clara. I was in a Mercedes. I had a tall curb. I was so thrown off that I literally ran into the curb and totally trashed the wheel on this car
Oh.
because I was so thrown off by the F bombs and stuff. I'm like, holy shit. Like, I guess it's like enough is enough. Like, you get to a breaking point,
Yeah. Yep.
Like I'm pretty level. I don't snap. But when I was really young, this one guy kept pushing for over a year. One day I snapped and I, did something very bad when I was younger. But nobody died, just for the record. But I'm just saying, like I lost it. Like, and so it's like I'm pretty level and pretty patient. But I kind of like I didn't snap at her, snap in a bad way, but it just kind of like I snapped to the point where like it was the final straw. Or I'm like, I'm just not gonna deal with this shit anymore. I was fucking tired of it. Like I'm just over it.
Mm-hmm.
It just was just done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, it's this lady, it's that other couple, it's that other person. The fuck are wrong? What's wrong with these people?
Right.
Sorry, I don't mean to be dropping F bombs, but I'm just saying, like, it irritates me because in all these circumstances, I was working hard doing a great job for them.
Yeah.
That's because, like, look, dude, I'll be the first one to say, you know what, I messed up. Like, and if I messed up and they wanted to drop an F bomb, well, maybe I deserved it, right?
Yeah.
But dude, to be disrespected when you're going above and beyond, doing a good job, And it was even more demoralizing because I care so much. Like I actually cared. It wasn't just a job
Yeah.
because I got over connected, right? Over committed to like, you know, there wasn't a good boundary for me. It's gotten a lot better, but like I said, even right now, I'm dealing with one that I'm kind of writing that line. But no, it was at that point that I was like, you know what? Screw this. Nobody can pay me enough to put up with this abuse or put up with this bullshit. Like, no, it's not going to happen anymore. I started canceling listings. Dude, it was so liberating. I mean, do the math on this. You know, $20 million in listings. I mean, dude, it's like a $500,000 in commission.
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes to how fed up I was. Just done.
No,
Like,
yeah,
just
absolutely.
done.
Yeah.
That was 9 years ago. And you know, since then, I've held the line pretty good. But there's been a couple times where I was like, I'm not sure, but you know, it's a good amount, you know, because I never focus on the money. Like I said, I just take care of people and the money's there. But there's been a couple situations where I'm like, you know, we could use a couple more deals right now. And this is, you know, it's in the neighborhood I like to work in. And, you know, because it's like, there's certain, like, we always have like kind of our favorite places, right? Like, there's certain pockets where you've had a lot of success or really enjoyed, you know, we're like, there's just really cool, like, neighborhoods and places where, you know, either people are super friendly or you absolutely love the architecture or whatever. Like, I don't know, just there's just certain places that you really enjoy, right? And it's like, you know, if it's something that's like in part of my like geographic farm or whatever, it's like I a lot of times was interested and I was willing to kind of close my eyes just a little bit sometimes, just because like you know, I'm overreacting, right?
Yeah.
Dude, no, like no, like I did that last year twice.
Yeah.
I but then that's what keeps me human, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. We have, yeah. We all have those moments where sometimes we like pull back a little bit, but you know, for
I
the
was like,
most part,
you know,
yeah,
make an exception. You know, this is gonna be,
yeah.
dude. Like that's
And then you
like
get reminded right
freaking,
away why.
dude. That's like going back to like Adam and Eve. Put that fucking plum down, brother. You know, like it just like that was like, oh my god. Like the regret, like the regret.
I mean, there's something to be. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah. So your kind of experience sounds like it's very much, you know, you had finally reached your limit, and you know that's really what drove the change that was needed. You know, it's interesting. I think mine was similar but a little bit different, right? Like for me, it was. I mean, for me, I learned how to not stop being a nice guy, not in the professional setting, but I learned it through the personal setting, right? Um, and I think you know, for me, it was doing like the a lot of the reflection that I've talked about on past episodes following my divorce. But I think one of the big things that happened during that self-reflection time was, and this is something that everyone I think out there can do, is starting to figure out, like, asking myself the questions of, okay, what's important to me, and where do I, you know, where is my value, how do I, you know, what is the value that I provide. And I think a lot of that is like, then as I went through that reflection, I started to write things down. What helped me is, what it started to help me see, you know, what are the things from a value perspective that are really important to me, that are kind of non-negotiables, like being treated with respect, right? Being treated with dignity. Now, this sounds all basic, but it's important, right? And it's like I realized, like, that's really important for me. Is like, it's okay, like, if you're upset, it's okay if, you know, like, there's emotions going on, there's like a bad experience, or if I screwed up, but there's still a way to communicate that effectively to somebody. And so for
Right.
me, like, that respectful communication is like, is key for me. That's something that is a non-negotiable. And so I think for me, writing down what's like my intrinsic values and understanding what my intrinsic values are really helped me understand who I am as a person, and help me to establish kind of how I go about setting my boundaries. And it's not easy, right? Like, for me, like, it sounds silly, but you know, like, but it works. Is, if you have a hard time saying no, start simple. Like, I'm serious about this. Like, I start with like friends and family that, you know, like, you won't piss them off if you tell them no about something. And it
How
sounds,
do you know you won't piss them off?
Well, I mean, it's like, well, parents. I mean, you start with your parents. I think, it's like for me, I chose somebody that I was like 95% confident, like that was a safe space for me. Right. And that would be like with my parents or with like my best friends. Who knows? I could have pissed them off, but like I was relatively confident. There's the engineer in me. Like, my confidence interval was high. Um, and so it was one of those things where it's literally like start small. Like if they make a request, and if you find like I found myself saying like, I don't know if I really want to do that. In the past, I would have said yes. And it's just a matter of taking that first step for me and like forcing
See,
myself to
that's like
say,
a
yeah,
codependency.
yeah,
That's like a
it
codependency.
was.
Like
It very much was before. And so
I
that's what I'm
talked to
saying is like
yeah.
you may not necessarily I don't want like there might be situations kind of like with you where like people reach like just the end and just like fuck it like I like drastic change right away, but there's also situations where it's like my situation where it's like I had to just slowly work into it, and it's like okay, when you say that first no, again it's like building the right, it's like building habits and it's building the momentum that you want.
You're building a muscle.
You're building a muscle. Say that first no, and then you're like, oh, this is literally the realization I had when like I was going through this was, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Because a lot of times you get into your head, like this is what people pleasers do. You get into your head, and it's like, oh, what happens if I say no? Like, oh, they're going to react in this way, and I'm going to feel a certain way, X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And so it's like by actually taking action, and then you start realizing, hey, it's not bad. So then you train yourself, you train that muscle. And the next time you say no to something else, and you like slowly become more ingrained on, okay, what do I find important? And you start listening to yourself when your subconscious is kind of telling you, hey, like you may not actually want to do this. And you learn to recognize that, and you learn to trust that, and you learn to embrace that. And that's kind of was my journey to getting to this point now where it's like I'm no longer that nice guy.
Well, I mean, you can see now why I mentioned the whole codependency thing, right? Because
Yeah.
like, I remember talking to a therapist a few years ago, and it's like I would be invited to go to dinner or go do something or whatever, and like a lot of times I would just be, oh yeah, sure, and I would never think about what I really want to do.
Yeah.
Like it was just like, oh yeah, I'll go, but it's like those times when it's like I was just going and going through the motions, but I really didn't want to go. But I was like, it was weird. I just autopilot, just go. And
Yeah.
then it's like, she's like, Shane, well, why don't you just say you're not up for it or you don't want to go? Why don't you think about yourself?
Yeah.
Like that's how programmed I was
Mm-hmm.
to just please and go along.
Mm-hmm.
I never even gave it any thought. It was so bad that one day she was asking me, she's like, hey, so what makes you happy? Dude, I went blank. I didn't have an answer. I went
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
blank.
Yeah.
Like, well, what makes you happy? It's like, dude, if I'm not pleasing customers, I'm pleasing someone I was dating or pleasing, a friend or pleasing found like it, this, I mean, this was years ago, of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've obviously come a long way since then,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, even then, sometimes now it's, I mean, I'm a hard no. Like I set boundaries for sure. Like I'm not going to cross any boundaries because of being weak minded, not at all. But I'm just saying, like, I remember going through that, and it becomes so autopilot.
It absolutely does. Yeah. And then what happens is you don't, yeah, to your point, like what makes you happy? Blank. So what's going on? You basically become a zombie. You're
Totally.
you're on autopilot, and like you kind of are just you're just trudging your way along through life and
Well,
without realizing.
when you're not pleasing clients, you're pleasing everybody else,
Yeah.
and you're never thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like a friend actually. It's probably been, I don't know, it was a while back, but I like lost my shit. A friend of mine was like, you're so selfish sometimes. You just think about yourself or something like that. And I was like, I like lost it. I was like, fuck, do you know me? Like, when have I been like, I always put everybody first to an extreme, like, and so it just, when I heard that, I was like, you don't freaking know me. Like, who says that? You know, I or being cocky and full of yourself. I don't hear that too often, but still, like, I mean, I've heard even things like that before, and I'm just thinking, yeah, like, I just don't, I don't know, I just don't roll like that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm guilty of not giving myself enough grace, and guilty of not giving myself enough credit. You know, guilty of just doing too much for others, which I guess is a good kind of circling point to kind of sum up like this whole topic, which, it's, I still care and I still want to be nice and take care of people. I just have had to learn how to really pull back and have good boundaries and learn how to disconnect the emotion, especially with the work. Like, understand that you're doing a good job. You don't need the validation. You want their approval, you want a good review and everything else, but don't sacrifice your dignity, your happiness, your self-respect for that.
Yeah. Yep. Know what's important for you. Understand that and stick to that. And it's interesting. Like we'll circle back to kind of how I started off this podcast, and then we'll kind of summarize what we talked about. Is these days, just don't say, "Hey, you're such a nice guy." You can call me everything else. Call me like, "Hey,
Dude,
you're very professional."
yeah,
Hey, you go
I
above and
I'm
beyond.
scared now.
You
I'm
know.
scared now, Michael.
Well, but it's based on everything we talked about. It's just like
Right.
I don't want to hear like, "Hey, you're such a nice guy," because there are other things like I would rather be known for anything else except for being called a nice guy these days, honestly.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I get what your correlation is on that. I mean, that totally makes sense. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we talked about that, and we just talked about some examples of, how we've dealt with it with clients and such. And I mean, you and I are perfect examples of been there, done that. Uh,
Well, I mean, we've gone through it, we've learned. So hopefully, like, for those out there listening, if you like find yourself relating to this, like, we don't want you to get to the point where like you reach your end and you like blow up at somebody, and like sometimes that might happen, but we don't want you to get to that point. So hopefully you found some things that you can apply to yourself in this podcast, and you can kind of see like what happens in terms of being a nice guy, how that it can impact your business and your personal and professional relationships, because you have weak boundaries, you become a people person, you're ineffective in how you communicate and set expectations, how all these things can hurt you in the long run. um, and hopefully we've talked a little bit about steps you can take to help yourself come out of that.
no, that's great, Michael. I appreciate you actually coming up with this topic. It was much needed. Some of these seem to come at the right time. So,
Right.
no, thanks for summing all that up, and great conversation. And I mean, that's a wrap for me.
All right, well, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast, and we'll catch you again soon in next week's episode.